The Galactic Assembly was the largest building ever created by intelligent life. It floated in the empty space between three star systems, a massive dome of crystal and metal that could hold representatives from over 2,000 different species. Today, every seat was filled. The air hummed with the sounds of 1,000 different languages, all translated by the small devices that every delegate wore. Ambassador stood at the human podium, her heart beating fast inside her chest. She had served humanity in this chamber for 12 years, and she had never seen the other species look at her with such hatred. The tall beings made of living crystal sat in the highest seats. Their leader, High Speaker, glowed with a cold blue light that meant he was pleased with himself. Knew that something terrible was about to happen. The Assembly will now hear evidence against the human coalition, announced. His voice rang through the chamber like breaking glass. 3 days ago, a human colony ship was detected in the exclusion zone. This is a direct violation of the neutral zone accords that all species signed 200 years ago. Images appeared on the great dome above them. They showed a ship with human markings floating near a red planet. Felt her stomach drop. She knew that ship. It was the medical frigate Hope's Journey, commanded by Captain Samuel Drake. It had been responding to a distress call from a damaged alien vessel. High Speaker said, stepping forward. That vessel was on a rescue mission. We received a distress signal from space and responded as required by the Mercy protocols. We have the transmission logs. The sent no distress signal, replied. His crystal body pulsed with light. Your logs are obviously fake. Humans are well known for their lies and tricks. Murmurs of agreement spread through the chamber. Looked around at the faces of delegates she had worked with for years, the whose plague her people had helped cure, the whose civil war had ended because of human negotiators, the broken collective, rebuilt with human engineering. All of them now looked at her with suspicion and anger. Her aide, a young man named Danny, leaned close to her ear. This is coordinated, he whispered. They planned this. Nodded slightly. She had suspected it for months. Humanity had joined the Galactic Assembly 30 years ago, a young species that had just discovered faster-than-light travel. They had expected to be small and unimportant, students learning from ancient civilizations. Instead, humans had changed everything. They had developed communication technology that let species on opposite sides of the galaxy talk instantly. They had found cures for diseases that had killed billions. They had ended wars that had lasted for centuries. In 30 short years, humanity had become one of the most influential voices in the Assembly. And that had made powerful enemies. The evidence is clear, continued. Humanity has broken the most sacred law of the galaxy. The Assembly must respond with appropriate punishment. Delegate of the consortium rose from his seat. He was a large creature covered in thick gray scales, and his yellow eyes burned with false righteousness. I move for immediate sanctions against the human coalition. All human vessels must be confined to the Sol system. All trade agreements are suspended. All military assets outside human space will be seized. I second the motion, called another voice, then another and another. Felt the walls closing in. This was not a trial. This was an execution. The verdict had been decided before she even walked into the chamber. The Assembly will vote, declared. The results appeared on the dome within seconds. 94% in favor of sanctions. Only a handful of species had voted against, and noticed that most of them were the weakest members of the Assembly. The ones who had nothing to gain from betraying humanity. The motion carries, announced. Human vessels have 7 days to return to the Sol system. Any ship found outside human space after that time will be destroyed. Stood perfectly still. Around her, the human delegation sat in shocked silence. 12 people representing 8 billion souls on Earth, 3 billion on Mars, and hundreds of millions more scattered across a dozen colonies. All of them were now prisoners in their own home system. She thought about her daughter, Amy, who was studying biology on the colony world of New Geneva. She thought about her husband, Tom, who was commanding a research vessel near the galactic rim. She thought about all the humans who would be stranded, captured, or killed because of this vote. And then she thought about what she was going to do next. "Hi, Speaker," said, her voice calm and clear. "Before this session ends, I wish to make a statement for the record." His crystal form flickered with amusement. "You may speak, Ambassador, though I doubt anything you say will change the Assembly's decision." Took a deep breath. 30 years ago, humanity came to this assembly as children seeking wisdom. We came with open hands and open hearts. We shared our knowledge freely. We asked for nothing but friendship and the chance to learn. She paused, looking around the chamber. "In those 30 years, we have given everything we could to this community. We have healed your sick. We have fed your hungry. We have ended your wars. And now, because we have become too successful, too influential, too important, you have decided to destroy us." The chamber was completely silent. Even's light had stopped flickering. "We know that this evidence is false," continued. "We know that the manufactured this crisis because they fear what humanity has become. And we know that most of you in this chamber know the truth but are too afraid to speak it." She gathered her data pads and looked at her delegation. One by one they stood. "Humanity does not accept these sanctions," said. "We withdraw from the Galactic Assembly, effective immediately. And I leave you with this warning. You have made a terrible mistake today. When you realize just how terrible, I hope it is not too late to fix it." The human delegation walked toward the massive doors. Their footsteps echoed in the silent chamber. Every eye in the room watched them go. Just before she stepped through the doors, turned back one last time. "The galaxy watched us arrive 30 years ago with curiosity," she said. "Today, the galaxy watches us leave with satisfaction. But soon, very soon, the galaxy will watch us again. And this time, it will watch with dread." The doors sealed behind them with a sound like thunder. For a long moment, no one in the chamber spoke. Then, slowly, the whispers began. Some delegates laughed nervously. Others exchanged worried glances. A few quietly gathered their things and left through side exits. High Speaker stood at his podium, his crystal body now glowing with an uncertain purple light. He had expected the humans to beg, to negotiate, to offer anything to avoid punishment. He had not expected them to simply walk away. And somewhere deep in his ancient mind, in a place he would never admit existed, he felt the first cold touch of fear. 3 weeks had passed since the humans walked out of the Galactic Assembly. In that time, the galaxy had moved quickly to punish them. A blockade fleet of 47 warships now surrounded the Sol system, their weapons pointed at Earth and every human colony within reach. No ships were allowed in or out. No messages could pass through the communication barrier the aliens had built around human space. Admiral Chris stood on the bridge of the carrier steadfast, watching the holographic display that showed enemy positions around his home system. He was 62 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many battles. He had hoped to retire next year, to spend his remaining days fishing on the coast of Maine with his. Now he wondered if he would ever see Earth's blue oceans again. "Report," he said quietly. Captain Lisa Grant stepped forward. She was young for her rank, only 35, but she had proven herself in a dozen difficult situations. "The blockade is holding tight, Admiral. They have ships at every jump point. Nothing gets in or out without their permission." "Food supplies." Lisa's face grew dark. "Mars colony has enough for 2 months, maybe 3 if they ration carefully. Europa Station has less than 6 weeks. The outer colonies," she shook her head. "They were depending on supply ships that will never arrive." Chris closed his eyes for a moment. Millions of people were going to starve if he could not find a solution. Children would go hungry. Families would watch their loved ones waste away. And the galaxy would watch it happen and call it justice. "What about the intelligence package?" he asked. Lieutenant Park looked up from his console. He was the youngest officer on the bridge, barely 25, but he was the best code breaker in the entire fleet. "We've finished analyzing the data that Ambassador smuggled out before the blockade went up. It confirms everything we suspected." He pressed a button, and new images appeared on the holographic display. They showed communication logs, financial records, and detailed planning documents. "The set the whole thing up," explained. "They bought an old human cargo ship 3 years ago through a series of fake companies. They modified it to look like a colony vessel, gave it false registration codes, and flew it into the exclusion zone themselves. Then they altered the sensor data to make it look like the ship came from Earth." "Why?" Lisa asked. "What do they gain from destroying us?" Chris let out a long breath. "Because we were winning," he said. "Not through war or conquest, but through kindness. Every time we helped another species, we made a friend. Every time we solved a problem, we gained influence. They have controlled the assembly for 2,000 years. They saw us as a threat to their power. So they decided to eliminate us before we became too strong," Lisa said bitterly. "It's an old story," Chris replied. "Fear makes people do terrible things, even people made of crystal." The bridge fell silent. Outside the viewports, the stars shone cold and distant. Somewhere out there, enemy ships waited with weapons charged, ready to destroy any human vessel that tried to escape. Chris turned to face his crew. These were good people, loyal and brave. They had served humanity with honor their whole lives. They deserved to know the truth. "I'm going to tell you something that very few people know," he said. "For the past 15 years, humanity has been preparing for this day. Not because we wanted war, but because we knew that someday someone would try to destroy us. And we decided that we would not let that happen." He pressed a sequence of buttons on his command console. The holographic display changed, showing something that made everyone on the bridge gasp. Hidden throughout the Sol system, in hollowed-out asteroids and secret stations buried beneath the ice of distant moons, humanity had built a second fleet. 300 ships, each one designed with technology that the galaxy had never seen. Black holes that absorbed sensor beams. Engines that burned with power sources that could not understand. Weapons that did not kill but disabled and captured. "We call it Project Phoenix," Chris said. "It was started by my predecessor, Admiral Grace, 15 years ago. She saw what was coming, even if the politicians didn't want to believe it. She knew that humanity would someday face a moment like this." Lisa stared at the display with wide eyes. "Admiral, this changes everything." "Yes," Chris agreed. "It does. But I want to be very clear about something. Our goal is not to destroy the blockade fleet. Our goal is to break through it without killing anyone." Looked confused. "Sir, they're trying to starve us to death. Why should we show them mercy?" Chris walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. "Because that's what makes us human," he said quietly. "Any species can kill its enemies. Any species can answer cruelty with cruelty. But we have a chance to do something different. We have a chance to show the galaxy that there is another way." He turned back to face his crew. "If we destroy that fleet, we become exactly what they accused us of being. We become monsters. But if we defeat them without killing them, if we show mercy to the people who would have watched us die, then we prove something important. We prove that humanity is better than its enemies." The bridge was silent for a long moment. Then Lisa nodded slowly. "When do we move?" "President Santos is addressing the United Nations right now," Chris said. "She's showing the evidence to the whole world. Every human being will know what they did to us, and they will know what we're about to do in response." He straightened his uniform and took his place in the command chair. "In 3 days, the Phoenix fleet will launch. We will break through the blockade. We will open the jump points. And we will remind the galaxy that humanity does not surrender. Not to threats, not to lies, and not to fear." Across the solar system, In hidden bases and secret shipyards, 300 crews received their orders. Engineers ran final checks on engines that had never been tested in combat. Pilots studied attack patterns designed to disable rather than destroy. Commanders gathered their people and told them what was at stake. On Earth, billions of people watched President Maria Santos speak from the floor of the United Nations. She showed them the evidence of treachery. She explained the blockade, the starvation that was coming, the death sentence that the galaxy had pronounced on humanity. And then she told them about Project Phoenix. The world held its breath as the president finished her speech. "We did not ask for this fight," she said. "We did not want this war, but we will not go quietly into the darkness. We will not let our children starve while the galaxy watches and does nothing. 3 days from now, humanity will show the universe what we are made of. And when the galaxy watches us again, it will not watch with satisfaction. It will watch with dread." The vote was taken. Every nation on Earth agreed. Humanity would fight. In his command chair on the Steadfast, Admiral Chris received confirmation that Operation Phoenix was approved. He looked at the enemy ships on his display, 47 vessels crewed by beings who thought they had already won. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Commander Al stood on the bridge of the cruiser Dominion, watching the empty space around the Sol system with bored eyes. He had been stationed here for 3 weeks, waiting for the humans to surrender. It was supposed to be an easy assignment. The humans were trapped, outnumbered, and cut off from all help. They would beg for mercy soon enough. "Anything to report?" he asked his sensor officer, a young whose crystal body glowed with the pale green of inexperience. "Nothing, Commander. Human ships remain in defensive positions near their colonies. No movement toward the blockade line." Al made a sound of contempt. "They know they cannot win. Every day they wait, their food supplies grow smaller. Soon they will have no choice but to accept our terms." He settled back into his command chair, already thinking about the promotion he would receive when this assignment was over. The humans had been a nuisance for too long. Watching them starve and suffer would be satisfying, and the High Council would reward those who had helped bring them down. "Commander," the sensor officer said suddenly, his voice uncertain, "I'm detecting something strange." "What is it?" "Energy readings. They're appearing all across the system in locations where our sensors showed nothing before. It's like something is powering up." Al stood up, his crystal body flickering with concern. "Show me." The main display lit up with dozens of red markers, spreading across the Sol system like a disease. They appeared near asteroids, inside the rings of gas giants, around distant moons. Places that had been empty moments ago were now blazing with power signatures. "That's impossible," Al whispered. "Our sensors scanned the entire system. There was nothing there." "Commander, I'm getting ship signatures now, counting. 50, 100, 200. The number kept climbing. From hidden bases throughout the solar system, the Phoenix fleet emerged from their hiding places. Black ships, invisible to sensors until they wanted to be seen, rising from asteroids and ice fields like ghosts. Their engines burned with a light that they did not recognize, power sources that human scientists had developed in secret. 300 ships, the sensor officer reported, his voice shaking. "Commander, where did they come from?" Al's crystal body had turned a dark shade of red, the color of fear. He grabbed the communication controls. "All ships, this is the Dominion. The humans have a hidden fleet. Form defensive positions immediately." Across the blockade line, alien ships scrambled to respond. Weapons powered up, shields activated. Crews rushed to battle stations. They had come here expecting to guard prisoners. Now they faced an enemy they had never anticipated. Admiral Chris watched the chaos on his tactical display with grim satisfaction. "All ships, begin Operation Phoenix. Remember your orders. Disable only. No kills unless absolutely necessary." The Phoenix fleet moved as one, 300 ships sweeping toward the blockade in perfect formation. They did not fire missiles or energy beams. Instead, they released clouds of small objects, each one no bigger than a fist. These were the heart of human strategy, autonomous drones programmed to disable rather than destroy. The drones swarmed toward the enemy fleet. Gunners tried to shoot them down, but there were too many, and they moved too fast. They slipped through shield frequencies that human engineers had studied for years. They attached themselves to enemy hulls and began their work. On the Dominion, alarms screamed as systems began to fail. "We're losing main power," the engineering officer shouted. "The drones are disrupting our reactor controls." "Weapons are offline," called the tactical officer. "Shields are falling." "Navigation is gone," reported the pilot. "We're drifting." Al watched helplessly as his mighty warship became a floating piece of metal. Across the blockade line, the same scene repeated itself on every alien vessel. Ships that had threatened to destroy humanity were now dark and powerless, their crews alive but unable to fight. One destroyer tried to run. Captain Lisa Grant, commanding the strike cruiser Arrow, moved to intercept. Her ship released a different kind of weapon, a gravity pulse that wrapped around the fleeing vessel and held it in place like a giant hand. "Vessel, this is the Human Defense Force," Lisa announced. "Your engines are disabled. Your weapons are offline. You will not be harmed if you do not resist. Medical teams will be dispatched to assist any injured crew members." The captain sputtered with rage over the communication channel. "You cannot do this. The Galactic Assembly will destroy you for this attack." "We're not attacking," Lisa replied calmly. "We're leaving, and we're making sure you can't stop us." The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 4 hours. When it was over, all 47 blockade ships drifted helplessly in space. Their crews were unharmed but shaken. Their weapons would take weeks to repair. Their pride would take even longer. Admiral Chris stood on the bridge of the Steadfast, watching the disabled fleet on his display. He felt no joy in this victory. These were living beings, people who had families and hopes and dreams. They had been told that humans were the enemy, and they had believed it. Now they floated in darkness, waiting to be rescued by their own people. "Send the message," Chris said quietly. Lieutenant Park activated the communication array. The message went out on all frequencies, broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. It showed footage of the battle, the drones, the disabled ships. It showed crews being treated with respect, given food and water and medical care by the humans they had tried to imprison. And it showed Admiral speaking directly to the Galactic Assembly. "This message is for High Speaker and all members of the Assembly," he said. "3 weeks ago, you voted to imprison humanity in our home system. You voted to let us starve. You believed that we would quietly die while you watched and celebrated." His eyes were hard as steel. "You were wrong. Today, humanity has broken your blockade. We have defeated your fleet without killing a single enemy combatant. We have shown mercy to those who would have shown us none. And we have done this not because we are weak, but because we are strong. Strong enough to choose compassion over cruelty. Strong enough to spare those who would have destroyed us." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The jump points are now open. Human ships will travel freely throughout the galaxy. We will bring food to our starving colonies. We will rescue our stranded citizens. And then, when our people are safe, we will return to the Galactic Assembly. Not as prisoners, not as criminals, but as equals. You made a mistake when you turned against us. You let fear guide your decisions. Now you must face the consequences of that choice. And the first consequence is this: the galaxy will see what you tried to do to us. The galaxy will see how we responded. And the galaxy will judge for itself who the real villains are." The message ended. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the footage in stunned silence. They saw the human fleet, black and powerful and terrifying. They saw the disabled blockade ships, helpless but unharmed. They saw mercy where they had expected massacre. And for the first time, they began to wonder if they had been wrong about humanity all along. On the bridge of the Dominion, Commander Al sat in his command chair, surrounded by darkness and silence. His ship was dead. His fleet was defeated. His mission was a failure. But he was alive. His crew was alive. The humans could have killed them all and no one would have blamed them. Instead, they had shown mercy. In the cold darkness of his disabled ship, Al felt something he had never expected to feel toward humans. Respect. The Galactic Assembly had never been so quiet. Representatives from 1,000 species filled the great chamber, but no one spoke. No one whispered. Every eye was fixed on the massive doors that led to the main hall. Everyone was waiting for the humans to arrive. It had been 1 month since the Battle of Sol, as the galaxy now called it. In that time, everything had changed. The footage of the battle had spread to every corner of known space. Billions of beings had watched the human fleet emerge from hiding. They had watched the blockade collapse. They had watched mercy being shown to defeated enemies. And they had watched the evidence that human intelligence officers had released to the public. Communication records, financial documents, planning files. All of it proved what Ambassador had claimed. They had manufactured the entire crisis. They had framed humanity for a crime that never happened. High Speaker stood at his podium, his crystal body dim and gray. In the weeks since the battle, his power had crumbled. Dozens of species had demanded his removal. The government had collapsed into chaos. Everything he had built was falling apart. And now the humans were coming back. The great doors opened with a sound like thunder. Ambassador walked into the chamber, her head held high. She wore the simple blue uniform of the human diplomatic corps, with no decorations or medals. Behind her came 2 Marine guards in powered armor, their footsteps echoing on the stone floor. Walked to the human podium as if she had never left. She looked around at the thousands of faces watching her, species that had voted to let her people die. She saw fear in their eyes. She saw shame. She saw uncertainty. Good, she thought, they should be uncertain. High Speaker, she said, her voice carrying through the silent chamber. I have returned to address this assembly. His crystal body flickered weakly. Ambassador, the assembly recognizes your presence. Thank you, stepped forward, placing her hands on the podium. 1 month ago, I stood in this chamber and told you that you were making a mistake. I told you that the evidence against humanity was false. I told you that you would regret your decision. She paused, letting the silence stretch. I was right. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, raised her hand, and they stopped. The evidence is now public. The galaxy knows what they did. They know that humanity was framed. They know that this assembly voted to condemn 8 billion innocent people based on lies. She turned to look directly at. They know that you, High Speaker, were part of the conspiracy from the beginning. His crystal body flashed with desperate colors. These accusations are true, interrupted. They are true, and everyone in this chamber knows it. So please, do not waste our time with more lies. The High Speaker fell silent. His light dimmed until he was barely visible. Turned back to the assembly. Humanity could have responded to your betrayal with violence. We could have destroyed the blockade fleet. We could have turned our weapons on you. We could have burned your cities and killed your people until no one dared to threaten us again. Her voice hardened. But we didn't. We chose a different path. We showed mercy to those who would have shown us none. We spared lives when we could have taken them. We proved that we are better than our enemies. She let those words hang in the air for a long moment. Now we are here to tell you what happens next. Delegate of the stood up, his scales bristling. You cannot make demands of this assembly. You from membership. You have no standing here. Smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We are not making demands, delegate. We are offering choices. There is a difference. She pressed a button on her podium, and images appeared on the great dome above. They showed the Phoenix Fleet, 300 ships spread across the jump point network that connected the galaxy. They showed human stations being built in neutral space. They showed colonies that had been saved from starvation by human supply ships. Choice number 1 said, "This assembly can acknowledge the truth. You can release an official statement confirming that humanity was framed. You can restore our trade agreements and return our seized assets. You can remove High Speaker from power and investigate all those who participated in the conspiracy." She paused. "If you make this choice, humanity will consider rejoining the assembly. We will share our technology. We will continue to work for peace and prosperity for all species. We will forgive, though we will never forget." The images on the dome changed. Now they showed simulations of what the Phoenix Fleet could do if it was used as a weapon. Cities burning, fleets destroyed, worlds brought to their knees. Choice number 2 continued. "You can refuse. You can try to maintain the lie. You can pretend that you did nothing wrong, and if you make that choice..." She let the silence stretch. "Humanity will build our own coalition. Every species that has been bullied by every world that has suffered under assembly corruption, every being who wants a better future will be welcome to join us. We will create a new order in the galaxy, one based on truth and justice rather than lies and manipulation. Turn to look at one last time, and we will make sure that everyone remembers what you tried to do to us. Your names will become words for betrayal. Your species will be known for their treachery. 1,000 years from now, children will learn about this day as an example of what happens when fear wins over wisdom." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted at each other. Some demanded that the humans be arrested. Others called for immediate acceptance of their terms. Still others sat in stunned silence, unable to process what was happening. Waited patiently for the noise to die down. When it finally did, she spoke again. "You have 1 hour to decide. Humanity will wait. We have waited for 30 years to be treated fairly by this assembly. We can wait 1 hour more." She stepped back from the podium and stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the chaos with calm eyes. Delegate pushed his way to the front of the chamber. "This is blackmail," he snarled. "This is exactly the kind of behavior we expected from humans." Looked at him without expression. "Delegate, your government received 12 million credits from sources in the 3 months before the vote against humanity. Your personal account received 2 million more. Would you like me to release those records to the assembly?" Went pale, his scales flattened against his body. He stepped back without another word. Turned to face the assembly again. "We know everything," she said quietly. "We know who took bribes. We know who knew the truth and said nothing. We know who actively participated in the plot against us. The question is whether you want that information to become public." The hour passed slowly. Delegates huddled in groups, arguing and negotiating. Messages flew back and forth between representatives and their home governments. Some species announced their support for humanity immediately. Others waited to see which way the wind was blowing. When the hour ended, his replacement, a younger named Speaker Ra, approached the central podium. Her crystal body glowed with the pale blue of surrender. "The assembly has voted," she announced. "We accept humanity's terms. Full acknowledgement of the conspiracy will be released. Trade agreements will be restored. Assets will be returned. An investigation into all participants will begin immediately." She turned to face. "Ambassador, on behalf of the Galactic Assembly, I offer humanity our deepest apologies. We made a terrible mistake. We allowed fear to guide us when we should have trusted in friendship. We hope that someday you will be able to forgive us." Nodded slowly. "Humanity accepts your apology, Speaker Ra. We look forward to building a better relationship with this assembly." She paused, and for just a moment her expression softened. "We came to the stars seeking friends. We still hope to find them. But we have learned an important lesson. Friendship must be earned with trust, not demanded with threats. We hope that the galaxy has learned that lesson too. The great chamber fell silent as turned and walked toward the doors. Behind her, the assembly watched her go with a mixture of relief, shame, and something else. Something that looked very much like respect. 6 months had passed since humanity's triumph at the Galactic Assembly. In that time, the galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. The old order was gone, swept away by the truth that humanity had forced into the light. A new order was rising in its place. Admiral Chris sat on the porch of his farmhouse in Montana, watching the sun set behind the mountains. He had finally gotten his retirement, though it had come later than he planned. The fishing rod beside his chair remained unused. His mind was too full of memories to focus on such simple pleasures. The door opened behind him, and his wife came out with 2 cups of coffee. She was a small woman with silver hair and kind eyes, and she had stood beside him through every crisis of the past 30 years. She handed him a cup and settled into the chair next to his. "The news says the government is finally stable again," she said. Chris nodded. "Third attempt. The first 2 collapsed within weeks. Turns out that when your entire political system is built on lies, it's hard to rebuild once the truth comes out." "Do you feel sorry for them?" He thought about it for a long moment. "A little," he admitted. "Most of them were just ordinary people who believed what their leaders told them. They didn't choose to become our enemies. They were manipulated into it." Sipped her coffee. "That's very generous of you." "Not generous," Chris said. "Just realistic. If we want peace to last, we have to understand why wars happen in the first place. And most of the time, they happen because ordinary people are convinced that someone else is their enemy." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to purple. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called out. It was peaceful here, far from the stars and the politics and the endless complications of galactic civilization. But the stars were never far from Chris' thoughts. Across the galaxy, the changes were happening faster than anyone expected. The coalition that humanity had threatened to build was forming anyway, not in opposition to the assembly, but alongside it. Species that had been rivals for centuries were now working together, inspired by humanity's example. Captain Lisa Grant commanded the peacekeeping force that patrolled the old conflict zones. Her ship, the Steadfast, had become a symbol of the new order. Wherever it appeared, fighting stopped. Not because people feared human weapons, but because they had seen what humanity could accomplish when it chose peace over war. She stood on the bridge now, watching a transport dock with a station. 6 months ago, those 2 species had been on the edge of war. Now they were trading goods and sharing technology, their old hatreds fading like bad dreams. "Captain," her communications officer reported. "Message from Ambassador. She wants to know if you can attend the signing ceremony next week." Lisa smiled. "Tell her I wouldn't miss it for anything." The ceremony was for the new accords, a set of agreements that would fundamentally change how the galaxy worked. No more secret conspiracies. No more manufactured crises. Every species would have access to the truth, protected by systems that humanity had designed. It wasn't a perfect solution. Nothing was perfect, but it was better than what had come before. Lieutenant Park had left the military to work for the new Intelligence Oversight Committee. His job was to make sure that no species could ever manipulate the truth the way they had done. It was difficult work, full of political complications and technical challenges, but had never been happier. He sat in his office on the assembly station, reviewing reports from across the galaxy. On his desk was a small picture of his parents, immigrants from Korea who had come to America with nothing and built a good life through hard work and hope. They had taught him that the truth always mattered, even when it was inconvenient. Now he was helping to build a galaxy where the truth was protected by law. Ambassador stood on the observation deck of the assembly station, looking out at the stars. Her aide, Danny, stood beside her with a data pad full of messages and meeting requests. "The delegation wants to discuss trade agreements," Danny said. "They are asking about technology sharing, and there's a request from the new speaker for a private meeting." Nodded, "Schedule them all, but first I want a few minutes to myself." Danny understood. He left quietly, closing the door behind him. Stood alone with the stars, thinking about everything that had happened. She thought about the fear she had felt when she walked out of the assembly 6 months ago. She thought about the uncertainty when the Phoenix fleet launched. She thought about the moment when she realized that humanity had won, not through violence, but through strength of character. And she thought about her daughter, Amy, who was now working on a joint human-alien research project on the colony world of New Geneva. She thought about her husband, Tom, whose research vessel had been among the first to leave Sol's system after the blockade fell. She thought about all the humans who were now spreading across the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as partners. The door opened behind her. Danny had returned. "Ma'am, there's someone here to see you. He says it's important." Turned, standing in the doorway was Commander Al, the who had led the blockade fleet. His crystal body glowed with the soft blue of humility. "Ambassador," he said, "I hope I am not intruding." Studied him for a moment. This was the being who had been prepared to watch humanity starve. Now he stood before her, asking for a moment of her time. "What can I do for you, Commander?" Al moved into the room slowly, as if unsure of his welcome. "I have come to apologize," he said. "Not on behalf of my government, but for myself. I followed orders that I knew were wrong. I was prepared to watch innocent people die because my leaders told me they were dangerous." He stopped a few feet away from her, his crystal body flickering with emotion. "When your fleet disabled my ship, I expected to die. I expected humans to show us the same cruelty that we had planned for them. Instead, your people gave us food and water. They treated our injured. They showed us mercy." His voice grew quiet. "I have spent the last 6 months thinking about that mercy. I have asked myself why you chose to spare us when you had every right to destroy us, and I think I finally understand." "Waited. You showed us mercy because you wanted us to become better," Al said. "Not through fear, but through example. You proved that there was another way, and now I want to be part of that other way." He straightened his crystal body. "I have resigned from the military. I am offering my services to the peacekeeping force. I want to help build the galaxy that your people have shown is possible." Looked at him for a long moment. 6 months ago, this being had been her enemy. Now he stood before her, humbled and hopeful, asking for a chance to make things right. This, she realized, was what victory really looked like. Not defeated enemies, but converted ones. Not submission, but transformation. "Commander Al," she said finally, "welcome to the right side of history." Outside the viewport, ships from 100 different worlds passed by. They carried goods and people and ideas, connecting species that had once been strangers or enemies. They carried hope. The galaxy had watched in dread as humanity stormed out of the assembly. They had watched in fear as the Phoenix fleet broke the blockade. They had watched in uncertainty as the old order collapsed and a new one rose. Now they watched with something different. They watched with wonder. They watched with hope. They watched with the knowledge that the future could be better than the past. And humanity, the young species that had come to the stars seeking friendship, had shown them the way. In his farmhouse in Montana, Chris finished his coffee and smiled at the evening stars. In her office on the assembly station, welcomed an old enemy into a new alliance. In ships and stations and colonies across the galaxy, humans and aliens worked together to build something better. The story was not over. There would be new challenges, new conflicts, new tests of character. But humanity had proven something important. They had proven that strength and mercy could exist together. They had proven that fear could be answered with hope. And they had proven that, when humanity set its mind to something, the galaxy had better pay attention. Because humans did not just survive, they inspired, they transformed, they showed others what was possible. And that was the most powerful weapon of all.